The aliens' confusion. The space station, Sifos 9, was a massive structure floating in deep space. Bright neon lights flickered along its metal corridors, and the sound of humming machinery filled the air. It was a meeting place for many different species across the galaxy. Merchants, soldiers, scientists, and explorers all gathered here. In one of the station's busy halls, a tall, muscular alien stood staring at a human with wide, confused eyes. The alien, a Tiquar warrior, had thick, blue reptilian skin and sharp ridges on his forehead. His 4 powerful arms were crossed as he studied the human in front of him. The human, Jack Carter, was an ex-soldier, now working as a security officer on Sifos 9. He was used to strange alien customs and weird questions. But what the Tiquar just asked made him freeze in shock. The alien narrowed his golden eyes and spoke in a deep, serious voice. "Human, why is there a tiny sandworm between your legs?" Jack blinked. He stared at the alien. Then he laughed awkwardly. "What?" Other aliens nearby turned to look. A small, furry creature with 6 eyes dropped its drink. A robotic merchant tilted its metal head. The hall fell silent. The Tiquar warrior did not laugh. His expression remained serious. He pointed at Jack's waist with one of his massive hands. "That creature, it moves. It is alive." Jack frowned. He glanced down at himself, and then he saw it. Something wriggled. For a second, his mind refused to believe it. But there was something alive near his belt, a small, worm-like creature, pale and slick, shifting slightly against his uniform. Jack's blood turned cold. His first instinct was to grab it and throw it away. But the moment his fingers touched it, a sharp pain shot through his body. He gritted his teeth, eyes widening as the pain spread from his waist to his chest, then to his skull. It was as if something was digging inside him. The parasite was not just attached to him. It was inside him. The Tiquar warrior took a step back, his muscles tensing. "Foolish human," he growled. "That is no sandworm. That is a solor." Jack winced as another pulse of pain ran through him. He felt like something was crawling beneath his skin. "What the hell is a solor?" Jack gasped, breathing heavily. The Tiquar's eyes darkened. "A parasite. An ancient, dangerous species. It chooses hosts and never lets go." Jack's heart pounded. That did not sound good. A sudden alarm blared through the station. Red emergency lights flashed, and a robotic voice echoed through the halls. "Warning! Unknown bioentity detected. Quarantine protocols activated." The aliens in the hall panicked. Some ran. Others whispered nervously, watching Jack like he was a ticking bomb. Jack clenched his fists. He had fought pirates, battled rogue machines, and even survived an explosion once. But this was something he did not understand. And then he heard a voice. Not in his ears, in his head. A whisper, low and cold. "You have been chosen." Jack's breath hitched. He looked around, but no one else seemed to hear it. The pain in his body faded slightly. Instead, a strange warmth spread through his veins. His vision flickered. For a second, he saw strange symbols floating in the air, glowing, shifting letters he could not understand. The Tiquar took another step back. His hands clenched into fists. "Human," he said slowly, "you must come with me. Now." Jack exhaled sharply, still feeling the parasite writhing inside him. His instincts screamed at him to run, but something told him this was just the beginning. The robotic station voice spoke again. "Containment teams en route. Security lockdown initiated." Jack had only seconds to decide. Would he trust the alien warrior? Or would he risk facing the station's armed security alone, with an unknown creature inside him? The deadly secret of the parasite. A sharp mechanical hiss filled the air as the space station's emergency lockdown activated. Red warning lights flashed across the corridor, and a robotic voice echoed through the halls. "Containment breach detected. All personnel evacuate Sector 5 immediately. Jack Carter stood frozen, his breathing ragged. His hands clenched into fists, but his body felt different. His veins pulsed with an unnatural warmth, and his skin tingled as if tiny insects were crawling beneath it. Inside his mind, the voice whispered again, "You are my host now. You have been chosen." Jack's throat tightened. What the hell was happening to him? The towering Tiquar warrior, still standing a few feet away, seemed even more tense now. His sharp, reptilian eyes locked onto Jack, his body rigid. It was the look of someone staring at something far more dangerous than they had expected. Jack gritted his teeth and stepped forward. "What do you mean by parasite?" The Tiquar raised one of his 4 arms, signaling him to stop. His voice was low, urgent. "You do not understand, human. That is not just any parasite. It is a Salor." Jack narrowed his eyes. "You already said that. What the hell is a Salor?" The Tiquar inhaled deeply, as if choosing his next words carefully. The Salor is an ancient life form. It bonds with the host and takes control. No species in the known galaxy has ever resisted its influence. Jack's pulse quickened. His body was still functioning. He could still think, still move on his own. He didn't feel controlled, but something inside him was changing, that much was certain. He took another step forward. "You're saying this thing." He gestured to his waist, where the worm-like creature had fused into his skin. "Is going to turn me into some kind of alien puppet." The Tiquar didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied Jack for a long moment, his golden eyes narrowing. Then he spoke, his voice even lower than before. "No, I am saying that you should be dead." Jack's stomach tightened. "Excuse me." The Tiquar nodded grimly. Every recorded case of Salor infection ends the same way. Within minutes, the host loses control of their mind. They become something else, something not themselves. And yet you are still speaking, still thinking. Jack swallowed hard. That should have been a relief, but somehow it only made things worse. Why was he different? Before he could respond, a new sound interrupted them, a deep, unnatural growl. Jack's head snapped toward the far end of the corridor. The walls trembled slightly. Something massive was moving behind the sealed doors. Then the station's containment teams arrived. A squad of armored figures stormed into the hallway, their heavy boots clanking against the metal floor. They wore sleek black exosuits, each marked with the insignia of Galactic Security Command. Their weapons, ion-charged rifles, hummed with deadly energy. Jack barely had time to react before one of them shouted, "Subject located. Target is the human. Restrain him." Jack's muscles tensed. Oh, hell no. Before he could protest, the squad moved in fast. One of the soldiers raised a containment field, a glowing circular net designed to immobilize biohazards. Jack knew that if they caught him, they wouldn't take any chances. They wouldn't treat him like a man. They'd treat him like a threat. The parasite inside him pulsed, and then his body moved on its own. Jack felt an explosion of speed. His muscles reacted before his brain could process. One moment, he was standing still. The next, he was dodging. His body twisted with inhuman reflexes as he evaded the first containment blast. What the hell? It wasn't just his speed. His vision sharpened, and for a split second, he could see the exact trajectory of the energy net before it even fired. It was like time had slowed down, his mind working at hyperspeed. Jack's instincts screamed at him, "Run. Now." His legs launched him forward, faster than he had ever moved before. In a blur, he sprinted down the corridor, past the stunned containment team. The world around him blurred. It wasn't just speed, it was precision. His body knew where to step, how to shift his weight, how to dodge the next attack before it even came. Somewhere behind him, the Tiquar warrior let out a deep growl. "Impossible," the alien muttered. Jack didn't stop running. He couldn't. The parasite was changing him. And for the first time, He wasn't sure if he was afraid of it or if he liked it. The station under attack. The alarms blared louder. The red emergency lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across the cold metal walls of Sifos 9. Jack Carter ran. His heartbeat was a drum in his ears, pounding in sync with the heavy boots of the Galactic Security Command, GSC, soldiers chasing after him. Their voices echoed through the corridor, barking orders. Target is accelerating. He's too fast. Contain him. Do not let him escape. Jack gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He shouldn't have been able to outrun trained enforcers in exosuits. Their armor enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes. They were designed to take down alien fugitives twice his size. But something inside him had changed. His body moved before he could think. Every twist, every turn, every leap. It was instinctive, almost too perfect. He felt lighter, stronger. And the voice inside his head whispered again. Your body adapts. Your mind resists. But soon, you will understand. Jack clenched his fists. Hell no. He wasn't going to let some alien parasite turn him into a puppet. A plasma bolt whizzed past his ear, striking the wall, and leaving a smoking dent in the steel plating. Jack skidded around a corner, his boots barely touching the floor as he lunged forward with inhuman speed. And then he saw it. The hangar doors. If he could just reach a ship, he could get off this station and figure out what the hell was happening to him. But just as hope surged through his chest, the station shook violently. The metal beneath him trembled. The overhead lights flickered, then dimmed. Somewhere deep within the station, a massive explosion erupted, followed by the sickening groan of tearing steel. Jack barely had time to react before the Tukwar warrior, the same alien who had warned him about the parasite, stepped in front of him, blocking his escape. Human. The alien growled, his golden eyes sharp. Do you feel it? Jack's body tensed. He didn't have time for this. Move, big guy. I've got a station full of trigger-happy soldiers trying to put me in a cage. The Tukwar didn't budge. Instead, he looked past Jack, his eyes narrowing. They are not your greatest concern. Jack hesitated. And then, he felt it. A presence. Something cold, immense, ancient. It slithered through his mind like a shadow, pressing against his thoughts, whispering things he couldn't understand. It wasn't the parasite speaking this time. It was something else. Jack turned just as the sealed blast doors at the end of the corridor exploded inward. The air filled with the sound of rending metal and high-pitched shrieks. And then they came. Black, skeletal creatures, their elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp talons. Their skin was a shifting void, a darkness so deep it seemed to absorb the light around them. Their heads were smooth, featureless, except for a single glowing slit where their eyes should have been. They moved with unnatural fluidity, as if reality itself struggled to define their shape. Jack's stomach twisted. These were not normal aliens. The Tukwar warrior's voice was grim. The Drethors have come. Jack had heard of them before. A species that should not exist. The Drethors were hunters of ancient bioweapons, wiping out anything they believed could threaten the balance of the universe. And from the way they moved, from the way they ignored the other aliens and locked onto him, Jack knew exactly what they had come for. They weren't here to destroy the station. They were here for the parasite inside him. One of the Drethors let out a distorted, chittering hiss and lunged forward, its claws aimed straight for Jack's skull. Jack's body reacted before he could even process the attack. His vision sharpened. He could see the attack coming before it even happened. A split second before the Drethor struck, he sidestepped and drove his fist into its chest. The creature shrieked. Jack's eyes widened as his punch sent the thing flying backward into the wall. What the hell? That wasn't human strength. The Drethor twitched, then screeched louder. And then more of them came. Dozens, maybe hundreds, pouring through the broken doors, their glowing slits locked onto Jack. The parasite inside him pulsed. And this time, it didn't whisper. It roared. A wave of pure energy shot through Jack's body. His skin burned, his bones felt like they were on fire, but at the same time, he felt powerful. His hands clenched, and for the first time, he felt the parasite move with him. The Taquar warrior stepped forward, drawing a vibrating energy blade from his side. He didn't look at Jack. He kept his gaze locked on the approaching Drethors. "Human," he said, "now you understand. They do not fear you. They fear what you are becoming." Jack exhaled, his fingers tingling with a strange new power. The Drethors charged. Jack grinned. "Yeah, well, they should be." And then, he fought. The escape and the mind battle. Jack Carter moved faster than thought. His body twisted as the first Drethor lunged, its skeletal claws slicing through the air, where his throat had been a second ago. Instinct, or something far worse, pulled him into motion, dodging, shifting, countering. His right hand shot forward, fingers curling into a tight fist as he delivered a crushing blow to the creature's chest. A sickening crack echoed through the corridor. The Drethor screeched and flew backward, slamming into the bulkhead. The impact sent a wave of vibration through the station's metal plating. But Jack didn't stop. He had no time to think. Another Drethor came from the left. Jack spun, ducking beneath a set of razor-sharp talons, then lashed out with his foot. His boot connected with the creature's knee, shattering the joint. The alien collapsed, hissing as its limb twisted unnaturally. Jack had never fought like this before. He had trained in hand-to-hand combat back in the military, sure. He was strong. He was fast. But this was beyond human. His movements were calculated, fluid, as if his body was pulling from an unseen reservoir of knowledge. It wasn't just reflex. It was something deeper. And that scared the hell out of him. But he didn't have time to be afraid. The Drethors kept coming. They moved like shadows, their bodies warping in and out of sight, appearing in flashes of darkness. Their eerie, slit-like eyes pulsed with hunger, their jagged limbs reaching for him with unnatural speed. Jack braced himself, and then the Taquar warrior was there, moving beside him like a force of nature. With a deep guttural snarl, the reptilian alien lunged forward, swinging his vibrating energy blade in a perfect arc. The weapon sliced cleanly through a Drethor's torso, severing it in half. A burst of black mist, the thing's blood, erupted into the air. The warrior didn't stop. He spun, his 4 powerful arms working in sync, deflecting attacks, slashing through the creatures like he had done this 1,000 times before. Jack exhaled. Good. At least he wasn't alone in this fight. Then, a new sound. A low, resonating hum. Jack's head snapped toward the far end of the corridor. Through the flashing emergency lights and the chaos, a massive figure emerged from the smoke, a Drethor warlord. It was larger than the others. Its body, wrapped in shifting black energy, seemed to bend reality itself. Unlike the smaller Drethors, this one had no face at all, only a void where its head should be, radiating an eerie, suffocating presence. Jack's breath caught in his throat. This thing wasn't just a soldier. It was a commander. And it was looking directly at him. The parasite inside Jack's body twitched. A sudden pulse of heat spread through his chest. His skin tingled, his bones vibrated, and then the warlord spoke, not with words, with thought. "You are an anomaly, human." The voice was inside his skull. Jack staggered, gripping his temples as his mind filled with a storm of whispers, voices layered upon voices, speaking in languages he didn't understand. The parasite inside him responded, not with words, but with raw emotion. Rage, fear, defiance. And then, a flood of memories. Not Jack's memories. Something older. Something alien. He saw flashes of a dying world, oceans turning to dust, a massive war between species long forgotten. He saw the Silor, the parasite species, not as monsters, but as weapons created to fight an enemy beyond comprehension, an enemy that couldn't be destroyed. Jack gasped, stumbling back. His head pounded, the visions too intense, too much. The Drethor warlord stepped forward. Your kind was never meant to wield the Solor. It will consume you. It will take everything you are. Jack's vision blurred. His heartbeat slowed. His body, his mind, was slipping. The parasite was pushing him toward something. Something dark. Something unstoppable. No. No. Jack gritted his teeth, forcing himself to fight back. His fists clenched, his breathing ragged. He wouldn't lose himself to this thing. Not now. Not ever. The warlord tilted its head. Then, it raised a hand. Jack's muscles locked. A force, unseen and suffocating, wrapped around his body. He was lifted into the air, held in place by nothing but the Drethor's will. The whispers in his head grew deafening. The parasite pulsed, fighting back, but Jack knew. This wasn't a battle of strength anymore. This was a battle of will. The Drethor's voice turned cold. Surrender, human. Give in to the void. Jack grinned. Not a chance. Ugly. And then, a shockwave of energy erupted from his body. The air rippled outward, sending the warlord stumbling back. The invisible grip on Jack shattered, and he dropped to the floor. The parasite inside him burned like a second heart. His veins glowed faintly, the energy inside him thrumming like a power source on the verge of overload. Jack wiped blood from his lip. Your mind games suck, he muttered. The Drethor warlord hissed, recovering, its body shifting, twisting into something even darker. Jack cracked his knuckles. Round 2. Then, from behind, a massive explosion. Jack barely had time to react before a shockwave tore through the station, rupturing metal, sending entire sections of the hangar collapsing. The station was coming apart, and they needed to get the hell out of there. The Tukwar warrior grabbed Jack's shoulder. The escape pods. Now, Jack hesitated. The Drethor warlord was still standing. If they left now, it would follow. He had one choice: fight or escape. The station trembled again. Fire and smoke filled the corridor. The sounds of shrieking Drethors echoed in the distance. Jack exhaled. Then he ran. For now, survival mattered more than victory. For now. The truth about the parasite. The escape pod rocketed through the shattered remains of Typhos 9, spinning wildly as debris from the station's destruction scattered through space. The explosion had ripped through the lower sectors, leaving behind a graveyard of twisted metal and fire, and behind it, the Drethors were still watching, waiting. Jack Carter's hands were clenched around the pod's control panel, his breathing heavy. His heart pounded in his chest, but not just from the escape. Something else was happening inside him. Something was changing. The Tukwar warrior, sitting across from him, studied him with those deep golden eyes. The reptilian alien had been silent ever since they escaped, but now, as the pod stabilized and they drifted toward open space, he finally spoke. Your body should be breaking apart. Jack blinked. Excuse me. The Tukwar leaned forward, his voice a low growl. The Solor, it does not share its power. It does not allow its hosts to remain themselves. And yet, you still resist it. Why? Jack exhaled, pressing his fingers to his temples. He could still feel the parasite. It wasn't speaking now, but it was there, pulsing beneath his skin, coiled around his spine like a second nervous system. I don't know, Jack admitted. I should be dead, right? Every other host lost control within minutes. But I feel normal. Almost. The Tukwar studied him for a long moment. Then he reached into a compartment near his seat, pulled out a holo device, and activated it. A series of ancient symbols flickered in the air, glyphs, records, some older than human civilization itself. Jack's gut twisted as the words formed a clear message. The first host. The last weapon. Jack frowned. What the hell does that mean? The Tuquar's expression darkened. The truth about the Solor is far older than you think, human. They were not parasites. Not at first. They were created, engineered, to bond with the strongest minds in the universe. And once they did, Jack's fingers curled. You're saying they were designed? The Tuquar nodded. Thousands of years ago, before our wars, before the great empires, there was another war. One against an enemy that could not be destroyed. Jack didn't need to ask. He already knew who the enemy was. The Voidborns. The creatures he had seen in the visions. The ones that ate entire galaxies. The parasite inside him twitched. Jack swallowed. The Drethors said it would consume me. Take over my mind. So why hasn't it? The Tuquar hesitated. Then his next words shattered everything. Because you were not chosen by accident. Jack felt his body go rigid. What? The Tuquar's golden eyes gleamed in the dim light of the pod. The Solor do not bond randomly. They seek the perfect host. And you, human, you are the first successful host in over 10,000 years. Jack's breath hitched. Bullshit, he muttered. I'm just a guy. The security officer. I'm not some weapon. The Tuquar's gaze was unshaken. And yet, you fought the Drethor warlord. You resisted its mental control. No ordinary human could do that. Jack's head pounded. He wanted to argue. Wanted to say it was just luck. But deep down he knew. It wasn't luck. It was something else. Before he could respond, the pod's proximity alarm blared. Jack spun toward the control panel. A massive ship was approaching, emerging from the shadows of deep space. It was dark, sleek, and unlike anything he had ever seen. Then, the communication screen flickered to life. A figure appeared. Not a Drethor, not a human, but something else entirely. A being of pure energy. Its form constantly shifted, glowing lines of light flickering around its humanoid frame. It had no eyes, no mouth, only a voice that echoed through the pod's speakers with a power that sent chills down Jack's spine. Human, you carry the last of the Solor. Jack's fingers curled into fists. Who the hell are you? The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a single glowing hand. And Jack felt something inside him unlock. A rush of memories flooded his mind. Not his. The parasites. Flashes of war. Galaxies burning. The creation of the Solor as the last weapon against the Voidborns. And then, a message. A warning. The voice inside his head returned, stronger this time. They are coming. Jack's pulse spiked. The figure on the screen tilted its head. The decision must be made. Will you embrace what you are becoming, or will you die fighting it? Jack exhaled sharply. His mind spun. His body burned. He didn't know what he was anymore. A soldier, a host, a weapon, and then in the distance, the stars began to vanish. The Voidborns had arrived. The choice had to be made. Now, the final stand. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Jack Carter sat frozen in the cockpit of the escape pod, staring at the massive energy being on the communication screen. Its glowing form pulsed like a dying star, shifting between colors that Jack had no name for. It had no eyes, no mouth, just an overwhelming presence. And beyond it, the Voidborns. The distant stars were disappearing, not fading, not blinking out, just vanishing. Jack felt it before he saw it. An unnatural coldness seeping into the very fabric of space, like the absence of warmth, the absence of matter, the absence of everything. The Voidborns had arrived. The Tuquar warrior beside him exhaled sharply, his claws gripping the armrests of his seat, his golden eyes locked onto the screen. This is no longer a battle for survival, human. This is a battle for existence. Jack's fingers trembled against the control panel. The parasite inside him twitched. Then, the energy being spoke. You are the last key. The only one who can stand against the coming annihilation. Jack gritted his teeth. I didn't sign up for this. The figure tilted its head, glowing symbols swirling around its body like celestial runes. You were chosen long before you knew. This allure, what you call a parasite, is not a sickness. It is a weapon. A legacy. The last attempt to stop the darkness that has already consumed galaxies before yours. Jack exhaled, his heart pounding. The parasite wasn't just alive, it was remembering. Flashes of knowledge surged through Jack's mind, too fast, too raw. Ancient battles fought in dead star systems, civilizations burning, the last remnants of a species merging with the Silur to create a warrior strong enough to fight the Voidborns. And now, somehow, that legacy had fallen to him. The realization hit like a collapsing sun. Jack Carter wasn't just a host. He was the last weapon ever forged against the Voidborns. The Tukwar warrior clenched his jaw. Human, you must decide. Will you fight, or will you let the void consume everything? Jack's fingers curled into fists. He looked at the energy being. If I accept this, if I let the Silur take over, what happens to me? The being was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke. You will not remain who you are, but you will not be lost. You will become more than human, and far less. Jack let that sink in. If he fought as he was now, he'd lose. The Voidborns were unstoppable in his current state, but if he fully embraced the Silur, he wouldn't be Jack Carter anymore. He'd be something else. Jack looked at the stars, at the encroaching darkness, and he made his decision. Tell me how. The Tukwar warrior inhaled sharply. The energy being raised its glowing hands. The parasite inside Jack's body seized control. And then, pain. A fire unlike anything Jack had ever felt erupted through his body. His veins burned as energy surged through him. His bones felt like they were breaking, reforming, stretching into something more. The escape pod's alarms screamed. The Tukwar warrior shouted something, but Jack couldn't hear him. His vision exploded into pure light. And then, the stars disappeared. The transformation. Jack Carter was gone. At least, the Jack Carter who had once been human. His mind stretched into places it was never meant to go. He could feel the fabric of space, sense the ripples of energy that flowed through the cosmos. And at the center of it all, the Voidborns. For the first time, he understood them. They were not creatures, not entities. They were entropy made manifest, a force that devoured all matter, all energy, all life. Not because of hate, not because of hunger, but because that was simply what they were. The first Voidborn turned its eyeless face toward him. It spoke without speaking. You cannot stop us. Jack's new form crackled with power. He raised a hand, and the space around him shuddered. The parasite had evolved him into something beyond human. Jack's voice was both his own and something greater as he answered. I don't need to stop you. I just need to make you afraid. And then, for the first time in the history of the universe, a Voidborn hesitated. Jack moved. The final battle. The Voidborns attacked first. Reality bent and shattered as waves of darkness crashed toward Jack, erasing stars, consuming everything in their path. But Jack was ready. He raised his new hands, and a barrier of pure white energy erupted around him. The darkness clashed against it, recoiling like it had touched something it had never encountered before. Jack grinned. The power of the Silur had fused with his very being. He wasn't just a host anymore. He was the last guardian of existence itself. The Tukwar warrior, still in the escape pod, watched in awe as Jack became a living supernova. The battle shook the fabric of reality. Jack fought like a god. He tore through the Voidborns, his new form striking with power they had never faced before. For every world they had consumed, for every life they had erased, Jack Carter gave them something they had never known: fear. For the first time in eternity, the Voidborns retreated. The aftermath. When the light faded, the battle was over. Jack Carter stood alone in the void, his body still glowing with untold power. The stars that had been erased began to return, but he was no longer human. He had become something else entirely. The Taquar warrior's voice came through the communicator. "Jack, are you still there?" Jack hesitated. Then he exhaled. His voice was different now. Deeper, stronger. "Yeah, I'm still here." But he wasn't sure if that was the truth. The ultimate sacrifice. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind Jack Carter had known back on Earth. The kind that came with a quiet night, the distant hum of city life. No, this was cosmic silence. The kind that filled the space between galaxies. The kind that existed before the first star ignited. The kind that would remain when all things, planets, civilizations, people were gone. Jack floated in that silence, his new form glowing faintly. He no longer felt like he had a body, but he was still there. A consciousness wrapped in power, standing at the edge of a battlefield that no one would ever remember. The Voidborns had retreated. For the first time in eternity, they had tasted fear. But Jack knew it wasn't over. They would come back. And when they did, there would be no one left to stop them. Unless... Jack exhaled. If he could still exhale. He turned his gaze downward, past the drifting remains of the battle, past the ruined wreckage of Sifos 9, past the dying embers of burning ships, down to the Taquar warrior still inside the escape pod. His golden eyes were locked onto Jack, filled with awe, with fear, and something else. Hope. Jack wasn't human anymore. He knew that. The parasite. No, the Solor had changed him. And yet, he still felt human. Still wanted to be human. Jack clenched his hands into fists, feeling the raw power coursing through him. He had ascended beyond species, beyond time, beyond mortality. He could exist forever like this, watching, waiting, a silent guardian, the last weapon ever made. But Jack Carter had never been one to stand by and watch. He had always chosen to act. And now, standing at the crossroads between divinity and humanity, he knew exactly what had to be done. The sacrifice. Jack's voice, no longer just his own, but something greater, echoed across space. "I know what I have to do." The Taquar warrior's expression hardened. "Jack, whatever you're thinking." "No, listen." Jack cut in. "They're afraid of me now. But that won't last. They'll return, stronger. And when they do, I won't be enough." A long silence stretched between them. Jack continued. "This power." He flexed his hands, watching the shimmering energy ripple across them. "It wasn't meant for a single being. It wasn't meant for a war we can't win." The Taquar's voice was low. "Then what was it meant for?" Jack lifted his gaze, staring into the void. A new beginning. He wasn't going to fight the Voidborns. He was going to trap them. Jack could feel the energy inside him. Pure creation. Pure possibility. He wasn't just a weapon anymore. He was the key. And so, he reached deep inside himself. Deep into the heart of the Solor. And he let go. The birth of the event horizon. The transformation was instant. The energy inside Jack exploded outward, not in destruction, but in creation. A massive rift opened behind him, swirling with raw cosmic force. It pulsed, a glowing singularity at its core, pulling at the very fabric of reality. A prison, a trap, a place where time and space would collapse into nothing, where the Voidborns could never escape. The creatures screamed. Jack could hear them howling in terror, clawing at the edges of the void as the event horizon pulled them in. For the first time, they were not the ones consuming. They were being consumed. The fabric of reality ripped as the last of the Voidborns was dragged into the singularity. And Jack felt himself being pulled with them. The Taquar warrior's voice roared through the communicator. "Jack, get out of there." Jack smiled. "Can't do that, buddy." His body was unraveling, breaking apart like strands of light. He could feel his human self slipping away. But that was okay. For the first time since this all started, he wasn't afraid. Because he had chosen this. And he knew. He had won. The Taquar's voice shook. "There has to be another way." Jack closed his eyes, the warmth of the collapsing void wrapping around him. "Tell them," he murmured. "Tell them that a human did this." And then, with a final surge of energy, Jack Carter vanished. The aftermath. The galaxy would never know the full story. They would hear whispers, tales of a human who had sacrificed himself to stop an enemy that no one else could fight. The Drethers, once hunters of the Salor, vanished into exile. Without the parasite to pursue, their war was over. The Galactic Council, skeptical of the events, declared Sifos 9 a lost station, another casualty in the ever-turning cycle of war. But the Taquar warrior, he knew the truth. He stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the place where Jack Carter had been, where the singularity had swallowed everything. And for a moment, he swore he could still hear Jack's voice, a whisper on the cosmic wind, a reminder that one man had stood against the void, and won. Epilogue, a faint light in the dark. Somewhere, in the farthest reaches of space, where no eyes could see, beyond the barriers of time and existence, a flicker, a pulse, a faint, glowing light inside the singularity, and a whisper, "Not done yet." The void trembled. And then, silence.